Great job. So I'm going to read a little bio this morning. It's quite long, actually. I'm going to read a little bio about Reggie Ford, who's joining us this morning to speak with you guys. I'm excited for you to spend some time with him this morning. And at the end, I think we'll have a little time for Q&A, depending on how long that goes. But I would ask that you guys give him the same respect that you give to all speakers. So let's sit up straight and let's listen with your eyes open and your ears, okay? Reggie Ford is a sought-after motivational speaker and best-selling author of Perseverance Through Severe Dysfunction. By sharing his captivating journey of turning pain into peace through the process of perseverance, Reggie motivates positive change in all those he encounters. He tailors a unique approach to his audience, complemented by exceptional wisdom and contagious enthusiasm, ensuring a lasting impression. Through his work, Reggie helps organizations embrace vulnerability and perseverance through pain points impeding their success. A first-generation college graduate and former D1 football player at Vanderbilt University, Reggie brings a diverse perspective to his roles as an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, a mental health advocate, and a social activist. In addition to speaking, Reggie is a certified yoga instructor and runs Rose Creek Wealth Management. He lives in Nashville, Tennessee with his wife, Katie, and their Rottweiler, Rosie. Please welcome Reggie Ford.
Good morning. How y'all doing? Good. Can y'all do me a favor and look to a neighbor and tell them one thing that you're grateful for? I am grateful for fill in the blank. I said one thing. We got like 48 things that we're grateful for, but I love that. I love it. If y'all don't mind, I want to read something for y'all. Y'all mind? All right. I wrote a book called Perseverance Through Severe Dysfunction, and I want to read something I think will set the tone for the talk today. I found myself in a fetal position, crying my eyes out as my wife tried to console me. Having had only a few hours of sleep in nearly a month, I was physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted. The million thoughts running through my mind were muddled, and the few words I spoke were incomprehensible. The world around me had been shaken up vigorously, which resulted in an explosion of emotion that erupted on that cold hardwood floor. I felt abandoned. The people who had been a part of my life from day one were no longer there. The sensation that I was feeling had previously led me to cry out for the comfort of my mama. But in that moment, she was the last person that could ease my pain. Thoughts about my dad had grown so deranged that my defense mechanism was to pretend that he no longer existed. And although my parents were alive and just a few miles away, they were dead to me. I was consumed by grief. Granny was actually dead. And I felt that I had been cheated by her death and the events leading up to it. And all these emotions created this amount of depression and anxiety that I had never experienced in my entire life. I got to a point where I was lying there on the cold hardwood floor and I had this out-of-body experience where I looked at myself and I asked, how in the world did you end up here? And my journey, and what we'll talk about today, is me searching for that answer, trying to understand myself a little bit better so that I don't end up in that position. Because that's something that I don't want for myself ever again, or for any of you, or for anybody for that matter. And we could talk about all the great things. So usually when I get introduced, it's the high points. It's featured in Forbes. It's, 40 under 40, 30 under 30, all of these amazing things. And I think that is great. But when you're going through a life, it's not always going to be that great. And I want you to understand that there are highs and there are lows and that you can get through it all through perseverance. If you can hear, say persevere. Some of y'all can't hear. If you can hear, say persevere. Persevere. I like that. One more time. If you can hear, say persevere. Persevere. I love it. I've been persevering my entire life, y'all. My mom, When I was born, I came out, and the doctor was, trying to get me to cry, but I was too consumed with what was going on to cry. I looked back, and there was a 14-year-old lady lying in the bed who had just given birth to me. Who's older than 14 in here? Yeah. Who, if you don't mind, and no judgment here, who has a child in here? Jokester. Okay. See, and my mom, she was 14, just a freshman in high school when she had me. And as you can imagine, that comes with a lot of difficulties in life. Even leading up to that, right? What environment creates an environment where a 14-year-old has a child? Poverty, crime, violence, maybe some abuse somewhere, right? That's what I was born into. And then on the other side, my father, he was absent. He wasn't there. He was running the streets, in and out of jail. And then when I turned 8 years old, I remember looking up at the news, and I saw my dad's face plastered there. And beside his face, there were a whole bunch of different charges that he was responsible for: selling drugs, committing various other crimes, including attempted homicide. And I remember sitting down that night thinking, everything's about to change. Because it wasn't just he'll be gone for a weekend and come back. No, he's going to be gone. And it hurt. Anybody who's experienced not having one or both or any parent in the house, like that has a tremendous effect on you. And I remember crying that night, and I'm like, what is life going to be like? Even though he wasn't even in my life to begin with, but what is life going to be like when I crave that attention, when I crave that love? And my mom, she was present. She was very much present, and she instilled in me so many great characteristics, but emotionally, right? I talk about what leads to a 14-year-old having a child. Emotionally, she was very absent. She didn't receive the type of love from her parents that you would hope. And so what she gave me was her version of love, but it was flawed. And so I grew up longing for that, from my mom, from my dad, from everyone in the world. And I think when you long for that admiration, when you long for that validation, it can go one of two ways, right? You act out in a way that is just behavior, and it's a cry for help, and I understand that. Or it can turn into different type of behavior, and for me, it was perfectionism, right? If I got an A on a test or A in a class, then I was going to get a pat on the back, or someone was going to say they were proud of me. I hope. If I were to score 5 touchdowns, then somebody's going to cheer for me. I hope. Right? And that's a trauma response that is socially accepted. But I want you to know that if you are feeling that you have to be perfect, no one, and I told the faculty and staff this, no one is perfect. And don't ever allow perfection to impede progress. Don't allow perfection to get in the way of being good. Right? I did really well in a lot of different things. I was great in the classroom. When I was in 5th grade, I found out about this program called Backfield in Motion. And it was started by this wealthy philanthropist who was coaching a team in the projects. And he realized that his students and players weren't showing up to games or practices sometimes, and there was no family support. And so what he wanted to do, he wanted to take his resources and provide all the resources to eliminate the barriers to getting people there. And so there was a team that popped up in my neighborhood at the community center. And all my friends had run and rushed to go play, and I decided to join the team. And I'm telling you, everything was free, from the pads to food, transportation, tutoring. Everything was completely free. So for someone like me coming from poverty, we didn't have a car. We didn't have many things to where I could afford even registration fees. This was perfect for me. I was able to play organized ball. But the sports, it was just a hook. And if you don't know about hooks, everything has a hook to it, y'all. Everything. The real reason for that program was for academic enrichment. And so it was mandatory that we had to attend tutoring sessions. And that was probably one of the best things for me. Although I was a great student, I was still in an environment that wasn't fostering my academic achievements. Neither of my parents graduated from high school. And so to see that far out and to see, I'm going to graduate, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to do these things wasn't always in my vision. But through the program, I was introduced to a school like this in Nashville, Tennessee. And it was run by students like you. It was run by teachers like you have. And they volunteered their time. And one day, there was a student, Justin Elliott. I'll never forget him. He noticed that I was, crushing my work and helping other people out and just had an overall great positive attitude about things. So he decided to introduce me to the school. And I remember the first time I ever went was for a football game. I walking around campus, I have a beautiful football field, a football stadium, and we got any football players in here? Okay. Are y'all good? Because y'all didn't want to raise y'all's hands. Yeah, so first introduction was to a football game. And I remember, coming from where I came from, I remember the only thing that stood out was just how many white people there were. Because where I came from, there were very few. And I'm just looking like, oh, they want me to go to this school. I thought that was going to be a challenge for me. Fast forward a couple of years, and I was enrolling in the 8th grade. And leading up to that, this might have been my ignorance or my wishful thinking, but it was almost like this school, except it was all boys. And I remember going into orientation and thinking, oh, this is just orientation for the guys. They'll have the girls one tomorrow. I don't know. Like, why would they do that? But I got to school and I was like, oh, this is an even bigger challenge for me. But academically, I remember the first paper that I had to write. It was for summer reading, which leading up to that, I had never had to write a single paper in my life because not everybody had a computer. And I had to write 4 papers on 4 books that summer. And the instructions, write everything in 12-point font, Times New Roman, double-spaced. What the hell does that mean? All right, so I get to doing it. Computers already said in Times New Roman 12-point. Boom, 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 boom. What is double-spaced? Yeah, the space, space. Boy, space, space. I got this. Did, space, space, all space, space. And I did that for the entire paper, y'all. And I remember when I was done, I had all these little squiggly red lines under my paper, and I thought, that's it. They wanted me to proofread it. They didn't want me to just click spell check. Oh. But that was the differences in the world that I was going to, just from an academic standpoint. Something so simple as double-spaced. Had no idea. In that same English class, when I first got there in 8th grade, I had a teacher. She gave us an assignment for a creative writing assignment. We could write about anything that we wanted. So I took a page out of my life and wrote about a bunch of friends who played an AAU basketball tournament, made it all the way to the national championship, won, and it was great. And there was a character in the story that was one of my friends. His name was D'Angelo. And D'Angelo hit the game-winning shot, and he was carried off the court on everybody's shoulders. He was the hero of the game. When I turned the paper in, I got a good grade on it, but I got a comment on the top of my paper. Because D'Angelo, he came home that day after the tournament and told his mom all about what he had done and just how much of a hero he had been. And the comment said, this is a great story, but I find it quite unrealistic that D'Angelo's mom wouldn't be at the game. Unrealistic stood out to me because that was my normal. That was real for me, to be performing, to be on fields, to be doing great things and not have a single soul up there coming to watch me. And so that word unrealistic really challenged me in thinking about what is normal, what isn't, what should be normal. And I challenged so many different things about how I lived, how I was raised, how the environment around me was affecting me, all of those different things. And it led me on this pursuit of just discovering what was best for me, what was going to give me the most peace. And that was always in the back of my mind, is redefining normal. Because some of the things that we get taught may not be the most healthy for us. And some of the things that we go through, we call normal because that's a way to survive what we're going through, right? It's a coping mechanism. If I can't get out of this miserable state, then this miserable state is normal. I'm going to pursue through it. But at some point, it may catch up to you. You don't want to see yourself lying on a cold hardwood floor. That transition to my high school was so hard because I was the only person who identified as black in my class. And I say it that way because there was actually a half black, half Asian person in my class that he didn't identify as black then. And I reached out to him when I wrote the book because I wanted to mention that. And he was in the class. And I can't even imagine what type of things he was dealing with his own identity, being a biracial person in that environment. But I was the only person who identified as black in my class. And I found it so strange that people who had very little experience with black people had so many preconceptions about black people. They knew a lot about black people, but they had never been around them. I had people throwing stereotypes and judgments and all of these different things toward me, but it was all rooted in something that they had been told. They had never had the true experience. Had some awful things done and said to me, and I was one of the lucky ones, y'all. I was a star performer. I was teacher favorite. I was all of that, and even still, it was very tough. And I remember at the end of that year, I was just like, I'm not doing this. I'm not coming back. I'd rather go to public school with my friends and stay with them and graduate. I'm gonna do great things with or without this school. And I remember I called a couple of my buddies up and I was like, look, I'm headed back to school, headed back to public school. It was nice knowing you. And as soon as I hung up with that friend, his mom called me. I was like, oh no, we can't have that. No. Then I hung up with her. Dad calls me. Oh, can I come see you? Can I come talk to you? So he comes to talk to me. And he shows up to my neighborhood, and we're sitting in the car, and I'm sitting there. He's a big, stoic-looking guy. I was intimidated by him. He was a big old guy. And he just starts bawling. He's breaking down in tears, and I'm sitting back. I'm wondering, why is this man crying about where ninth graders deciding to go to school? In my head, I thought it was only because I could play football really well. It was only because I could run really fast and jump really high. But then he said something that changed my perspective. He looked at me and he said, his son was named Joseph. He said, Joseph is going to be a better man for having you in his class. This school is going to be a better place for having you be a part of it. And that switched everything for me because leading up to that, everything was about how the school would benefit me, how this place was going to rescue me and save me and do all these great things, but it was never, ever pointed out all the benefits that I could add. Have you heard of the story of the coffee bean? Right? There's 3 ways that you can be affected by the environment. Like one, you can be a carrot, right? And being put in boiling water. What does a carrot do in boiling water? It gets soft. So the environment that may be hard, that may be challenging, that may be rough, that carrot inside that water, you get soft. And you allow it to overtake you. And then there's an egg. Or you put an egg in boiling water, and what does it do? It gets harder. You can get hardened by that environment. Right? Your heart shut off, guarded by all the things that have impacted you. Or it can be the coffee bean. And the coffee bean, when it's in boiling water, what does it do? It makes coffee. It impacts the environment. It changes the things around it. And that was what was reinforced when that father came to me and told me that I was going to have a positive impact on his child's life, on the school's life, or on the school. So I came back. And high school was so much better for me. One, because I started to assimilate to the culture. I started to walk and talk and act and feel like I was a part of the school. But I'll tell you, to this day, the biggest and greatest thing was the people that I was able to hang out with in high school. Whereas I was the only person in my 8th grade class that was black, that identified as black. When I was in high school, I could have classes and go to lunch with other black students who were older than me. And having someone to go to talk to about things that, were like the old neighborhood, things that in pop culture references that they understood, like those things made a huge impact on my ability to show up every day, right? I think community is so important. Another thing that helped was the amount of support that I got from educators and administrators who knew that I came from a different background. They didn't know my complete story, but they knew that I came from a different background, that challenges were a little bit different from me. Right, the first day of school, I woke up on the couch in the projects at my grandma's house because we were transient. It's a fancy way of saying homeless, basically. And I got into a 1988 Buick that I had purchased at 13 years old from my mom. Drove to school. I remember walking through the doors and seeing myself and thinking, I don't know what this is going to be like, but my life is going to be a little different on the other side of this. Like, that was the world that I was coming from, into this world of privilege and so many opportunities, so many resources. I did really well there. I played football, and we were good. We would have whooped y'all. Went 13-0 my junior year, ranked 22nd in the nation. Ended up losing 2 games my senior year, but I got hurt, so that was why. But and then I got to the end of my high school career, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had done a lot of great things, from chorus to volunteer, and I had a great resume, but I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I didn't know where I wanted to go. Again, nobody in my family had done many things that I had done, that I was doing post 9th grade. And so I had a lot of different offers and opportunities to go to some of the best colleges in the world. I remember sitting down with a coach from Harvard, talking to the admissions office with Princeton and Yale, and thinking to myself, I don't belong at a place like that. When you experience trauma, especially in childhood, a lot of that sometimes is negative self-talk. Raise your hand if you've ever said something negative about yourself in your head. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not strong enough. We all do it, right? And so mine was, I don't deserve that. Let me hear everybody say, I deserve the greatest. I deserve the best the world has to offer. And you do. You absolutely do. And so in my mind, I said I didn't deserve that. I didn't want to be there. And I really wanted to be home because I had some younger siblings that I wanted to be around. And one thing that I felt that the people who, at my school, and the people who were pressing me to go to schools like that, they didn't understand, was that I was the oldest sibling of a bunch of fatherless children. And I felt that I had to be there for them because I knew what it felt like not to have a father around. I knew what it felt like. And I didn't want them to feel like another positive male in their life was running away and leaving. So I said I wanted to go to Vandy, to go to Vanderbilt University in my hometown, Nashville. And I went from this self-sabotaging state to actually trying my hardest on my SAT, on my ACT to get into the school. And I was confused, I was conflicted on whether I wanted to play football or play sports in college, because leading up to that, I had always had this stigma, because anytime I told people that I went to a school like this, the first thing they would say is, oh, you play football. And I hated that. How am I not good enough to just be here for my academic achievement? How am I not good enough just to be here? I hated that. So I said, if I'm going to go to a school, especially a school like a Harvard or Yale or Vanderbilt even, I want it to be on merit, on my academic merit alone. So I enrolled into the school and got in. And I missed football, y'all. It was my freshman year. They have this thing called the Gold Rush, where all the freshmen run across the field in gold shirts and before the first game. And I was one of the freshmen running, and I felt like I was in the wrong place. I wasn't in the locker room getting ready to play in that game, and I was running on the field, and that just felt weird to me because my whole life, football was life. And I had to really sit down and think. And after that, I decided I'm going to walk on. And I walked on to the team, earned playing time, and got to play for one of, I would say, the greatest coaches to ever do it when it's all said and done, James Franklin. It was, he's at Penn State now, but it was a phenomenal experience for me. And it also did something because I came from a school like this where I know it is challenging, it is tough, and every single day you're getting bombarded with work, with extracurricular activities, and all of that creates structure, and it creates a routine in your life that helps you be successful. In college, you're going to have so much free time. I was talking to Brandy or Miss Richardson earlier about this, and you get so much free time in college, and you have to be productive in that time, or else you will start to retract. And that's what my first semester in college was. I was just, again, I came from an all-boys school, and there were girls on campus, and I didn't want to do any amount of homework. And so I ended up with the worst GPA that I had ever had in my life. Then I started football, and the structure was back in my life. Dean's List, honor roll, all of that came back to me because of that structure. And I remember I met this girl in college. And she was sweet. She interrupted my conversation when I first met her, and I thought that was weird. I was talking to a bunch of buddies about some shoes, and they were Jordans, Air Jordans. And they were nicknamed the Olympics because Michael Jordan wore them in, I think, the 92 Olympics or whatever. And I go, I don't really like the Olympics. And she's sitting there, she's like, who doesn't like the Olympics? And I look at her, and I'm just like, hey, lady, what are you talking about? And she thought we were talking about the Olympic Games. She was just eavesdropping. But fast forward, and I ended up inviting her back to where we were hanging out the next day. She came back, and then we started hanging out, and before you knew it, we were in a relationship. And I remember telling her, because she came from a different world than I did, and I remember telling her a little bit about my life, as much as I could trust her with at that time. And she was studying pre-med, and so she took me aside, and she was like, hey, can you just answer this questionnaire real quick? And it was 10 questions. And I remember just, checking yes or no on this questionnaire. And before you know it, I got to the bottom, I was like, I got a perfect score. What's up? 10 out of 10 on the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. And if you don't know what that is, ACE score, ACE study, that is a look at all the traumatic events that you had in your life prior to, not all, but many traumatic events that you had in your life prior to your 18th birthday. And out of the 10, whether it's physical, emotional, or sexual trauma, abuse, I had all 10. And again, another moment of reflection for me on all the things that I had normalized. Because to that point, I was like, this is just life. This is what life is. It's nothing extraordinary. But for her, she had 0. It was eye-opening. And then that study that was done, it was first done by the CDC and Kaiser Permanente in 1997. They took 17,000 adults, and they looked at their scores. And they correlated that with their health outcomes, right? How did their mental health look? How did their physical health even look? Depending on what their ACE scores were. I think 6 or more ACEs, and your chance or your likelihood of dying 20 years earlier is increased. Right? You have a greater risk of heart disease, lung disease, all different types of physical ailments. Even your ability to connect with other people is altered because of it. Because of things that happen before your 18th birthday, a lot of things that you have no control over. Most traumas that happen, you don't have control over. And so I'm sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, I got dealt a bad hand. But the awareness around that, I could start to make adjustments. I could start to change. I could start to live a different life, a more healthy life. And I just put that in the back of my mind. One thing I didn't realize, though, when I was in college and I stopped playing football was that football was a love of mine, and I stopped playing after my junior year so I could focus on school and getting a job my senior year. And that senior year was so hard for me, and I grieved the loss of football. Some of you who may have had an injury and can't play the sport or can't do something that you love, right? If you used to sing and you can't do it anymore, dance, whatever it may be, like you may understand some of that. But I grieved the loss of football to the point where being at a party, I'm having a great time. And then next thing you know, I'm in the corner crying. And I'm just like letting it all out. Like, I can't believe this. And it wasn't just crying about football. It was so much unresolved trauma from my past. Right? I'm crying about my cousin who was just killed a couple weeks ago. I'm crying about my play sister who was run over. I'm crying about, all the things in my past that hurt me and I never cried about. Right? I told people that from 8 years old till I was 17 years old that I didn't cry at all because that was when my dad was in prison. That was a lie. Like I would cry, but I would do it in places where nobody would see. I would be in the shower and I would cry. If it was raining outside, I might shed a tear. And then if you wanted me to act, right, I could turn on a tear at any moment. It was all bottled up inside me. Right? And I started to notice that. But fast forward, I graduated from undergrad and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I went back to school. I got a master's degree in accounting from the Vandy Business School. And then I started my career in public accounting as a CPA during external audits for big corporations, Fortune 500 corporations. If you don't know what that means, I was really good at accounting, and I would go in to different companies and tell them that they were doing a good job or not doing a good job. And hopefully they were doing a good job, because if they weren't, they were mad at me just for doing my job. And I did that for a couple of years until one day I was just like, this isn't for me. And it happened to be the same time I saw this quote by Steve Jobs. And the quote said, in your life, work is going to fill a huge part of your life. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. And like all matters of the heart, you got to keep searching and keep looking until you find it. Because if you don't, you're going to settle. And settling will not lead to fulfillment. When I read that, and I was like, this is the position that I'm in right now, and I'm not happy. I had a great job, great company, but I wasn't happy. And so, like any smart millennial, I quit my job with nothing lined up. Y'all don't laugh. Can I get a ha? I like this corner over here. I quit my job with nothing lined up. I don't advise that, but maybe you find yourself in that position. And I started looking around for things that I thought would fulfill me. And I discovered wealth management. And coming from poverty, I had no idea what wealth was, what management was. I'm just like, okay, this sounds cool. I get to work with people and money and tell them what to do with investments and things like that. And so I decided I was going to join this wealth management company. And it was like, oh, I love this. I love what I'm doing. And I got to help so many people, solve problems for people financially, or help create, wealth for them that they had never seen, or help continue the wealth and pass it down to different generations. It was amazing. Totally different than anything I'd ever done in my life. I liked this so much that I decided I'm going to start a company doing this. I always had this entrepreneurial spirit. And so I started a company and I named it Rose Creek Wealth Management. And the name derives itself from the rose that grows out of a crack in the concrete. Right, through all the perceived impossibilities, its tenacity helped it reach the sun. Right, poor soil, no light, a little bit of water, but yet it grows. And when you look at the rose, you don't say, well, it has some damaged petals. You marvel at its tenacity to grow from that crack. And I felt like that had been my life. Right, all these different things that I was accomplishing in life, I felt like I was the rose. And immediately, the company took off. It was doing great. I was nominated for Forbes 30 Under 30. I ended up being Nashville top 30 Under 30, top 40 Under 40, all of these different things. I was featured in Forbes and talking about the importance of financial literacy and financial education, just because that was something that I didn't grow up with. None of that. And then I found myself on a cold hardwood floor in a fetal position, crying my eyes out. All this good stuff was going on. Not to mention I had just gotten married 6 months earlier, and that with the same woman that I was talking about from college, and it was a great relationship. I had great things going on in my life, but why was I there? And what it boiled down to was so much unresolved trauma. Right? Like I mentioned earlier, one or two ways: shut down, behave, act out, or be this perfectionist. It was socially acceptable to be a perfectionist, but it landed me on the floor. And so I had to, from that moment, start to work on myself and understand how I got there. How do I prevent that? I did a bunch of different things, a ton of things. I started journaling. I had always been a journaler. I liked writing songs and different things. I'm from Nashville. I got to write music. I started going to therapy. And if you come from the Black community, it's therapy's for crazy people. No offense, therapy's some white people stuff. Right? That's what we get told. But again, I was challenging the norm, challenging the things that I had been taught. I'm going to try this because all this other stuff got me down here, and I don't like where I'm at right here. So I'm going to do some different things. I started going to yoga. And for somebody who, used to run up and down the field hitting people, just running at them, now I think of football as like a really weird sport. Like, it's so weird. But the practice of yoga really balanced me out, right? It was so much more passive. It was so much more calm. It allowed my body to heal. And it allowed this connection between my mind and my body and my soul to happen. I needed that. Right? Some people get in a yoga class and it's unbearable for them because it may not be what they need, or it may be exactly what they need. I started writing. Right? This book was a collection of journals. During the most difficult part of my life, my grandmother, Granny, who I mentioned earlier in the book, she was the rock. She was the peace during all the chaos. From birth to the end of her days, she was my peace. Her and my grandfather, they provided a beacon of hope for me that things didn't have to be as crazy as they were at home. And she had just died. And in the midst of that, my relationship with my father, who he had gotten out when I was about 17 or 18, and we had built a very strong relationship. Ended up being more like best friends than anything. But with her passing, he didn't handle it the same way that I had hoped. Right? His trauma was catching up with him because she was his peace. And his reaction was to shut me out. And then my mom, who had begun resenting me as soon as I stepped foot in a school like this, we started to grow apart. And I've been in fights, I've been in terrible situations, and I can say no one has hurt me more than my mom has with her words alone. And so all of that was happening. And I had all this success and all this great stuff going on. And I'm trying to be a positive male role model for my siblings. They're going through life on their own, and it's challenging, and I'm seeing their challenges, and I'm taking on this burden. I'm feeling and absorbing everybody's pain around me. It's hard, and it feels fake to get on top of, or to get interviewed and tell them about all this great stuff that I'm doing from a business perspective when I am dying on the inside. And so I started to get rid of all that. I put it all in this book where I wanted to be my most authentic and vulnerable self, because I think we grow from stories. When you hear somebody else's story, you can put yourself, even if it's just a little bit, into their shoes. And that empathy and compassion helps build greater communities. Because when we can sit down and understand that a person, everybody, from teachers to parents to everybody you interact, has a story. When you understand their stories, then you can love and understand and grow a better relationship with them. And so all those journal entries, even journal entries from long ago, songs from long ago, I had collected, and I started to make a book out of it. And it became Perseverance Through Severe Dysfunction. It became a bestseller as soon as I released it. It was read from the Philippines all the way to Paris and everywhere in between. It was amazing. Like I was having a true impact on people's lives. Getting direct messages and getting emails from people telling me that they almost gave up. They felt alone. They were sad, and this changed something for them. And that fulfillment right there was everything that I needed. Right? This perfectionism in me, it told me I had to make the cover perfect. I had to make everything perfect. But then I threw that aside. And I had a goal for the book, and the goal was if I can impact one life, then it's a success, period. If I can impact one life. And I feel that I've done that. And I hope that today, maybe, just maybe one word has resonated with you. Right? I talk about the process of perseverance at the end of this book. The process of perseverance. And we hear all the time, trust the process. Trust the process. But very rarely do we get to understand what the process is. And in different realms of your life, process can be different. But in the process of overcoming hardship, overcoming trauma, overcoming the different things that you're going through in life, I think the process is this process of perseverance. From pain to passion, from passion to purpose, from purpose to power, and power to peace. Right? As humans, we're searching and seeking a lot of different things like as our goal. But I think the ultimate goal for humans, the ultimate success for a human is to be peaceful, to be full of peace. And so I could just take one example, right, of how that process has played out in my life. Right? Think about growing up in poverty. It's hard when you don't know where food is coming from. We don't know if you're going to be evicted or if you're going to have the same place to sleep at, how you're going to get to whatever place you need to get to. That's difficult. That's hard. It's stressful. Right? That was my pain point. It was a huge pain point for me, poverty. And so what that do, that created a passion to get money, understand money. Because if I can do this, then I won't have to feel that pain. Right? That pain and the fear of going back to that is one of the greatest motivators in the world. And so I created this passion. I need to get money. So I became that entrepreneur. Right? Because the passion can go one of two ways. Just like when you're affected by something, it can go one of two ways. Passion can be, I'm going to go get money by any means, or I'm going to do it in a way that is promoting, good values. I could have gone out and did the same things my dad did. I could have sold drugs. I could have robbed people. I could have done all that. But no, I created something positive out of it. And that's where the purpose comes in, right? That passion to make money was just a piece of it. But how am I going to do it? I'm going to do it by educating myself and learning what I need to learn to make legit money. And then creating that into power. How do you do that? Right? Power is getting the education. The power is getting all the things that I need to stand up in front of a client, to stand up in front of an audience, to stand up in front of a recital or whatever it is that you're doing and know that you have the confidence and the competence to accomplish whatever goal you have. And then peace. Right? Peace for me now is having financial independence to do what I want. Something that no one in my family prior to me had the ability to do. And not only that, to help other people in that journey as well. Right? That's a beautiful thing for me. And so the process of perseverance, that's just one example, right? I could talk about the other example of getting to peace in a mental capacity, right? Taking the pain of lying there on that cold hardwood floor and having the passion of never wanting to experience that again. The thoughts that were going through my mind, I didn't want to ever have those thoughts. I didn't want anyone ever to experience those thoughts. And so the purpose, right? I want to be vulnerable and authentic so people can learn from my story so that they don't end up in that same situation, right? How do I get power? I have to get credibility. I have to, not everyone, but write a book. I have to learn how to articulate my story, right? That's power that people look to. And then the ultimate piece is not knowing that I'm not going to be in that situation, right? I'm not going to be laying there on that cold hardwood floor anymore. And to know that I'm having an impact on other people's lives, right? There's peace. I'll be honest with y'all, most holidays in my life, probably all, honestly, been miserable. Like the holiday season, Christmas time and all that. I hated it. Like I just hated it. I don't know what it was, but I was just depressed. Until this last year, I remember coming home one day and I was like, hey, let's go look at Christmas lights. Let's go listen to Christmas music. I was in a joyful mood the entire time. And I think that was a testament to all the work that I had been doing since I was lying on that cold hardwood floor to get to a place of peace. And there's always going to be some times where you retract and fall down and have to get back up, right? But if you trust in the process of perseverance, become resilient. I talk to the faculty and staff about helping build resilience because you all have it. You all have it in you to bounce back from hard times and to do hard things. Then you can achieve peace in whatever realm it is in life that you want. And I want to open it up to questions, but before I do, I want to leave y'all with this. Right now is all we have because the past no longer exists. And the future never was. So right now, this is it. They ask me why I do what I do, and this is what I tell them. I get on stages and talk about the pains so that nobody else has to feel them. Because the pain from my past does not dictate the present. And the fear of the future only worries me if I let it. All I have is now, a moment to share with you, to tell you about my past and all the things I went through. Abused and neglected, a lot that's hurt me. But I rise above it, and you can too. Just keep working. Take your losses and turn them into lessons. Give grace and give back. That's the way to many blessings. Speak with convictions and love with no conditions. Stand tall, stand proud, and unlearn unhealthy traditions. Follow your passions and believe in your visions. Fall in love with the process and stay firm in your intentions. Trust that the results will be a byproduct of the work. And don't bottle up emotions because, as we know, bottles can burst. Create the life you choose to live and surround yourself with those you love. Give thanks for every breath and linger with every hug. For all we have is now, this moment, this day. Spread light and love everywhere you go and tell people that's the Raider way. And before I go, I want to hear something loud and clear, especially from y'all. When I say as long as I'm here, I want y'all to say I'll persevere. As long as I'm here, I'll persevere. As long as I'm here, I'll persevere. Louder, as long as I'm here, I'll persevere. Thank you. My name is Reggie Ford. I appreciate y'all. Questions, comments? Yes. He asked, does this bracelet on my wrist have any significance? And yes, I'm glad you pointed that out. So what I didn't mention is I loved yoga so much that I got certified as a yoga instructor. And the process, 200 hours of grueling, intense emotional work, yoga work, all of that. And at the end, I was given this, and it was infused with unconditional love and grace. And so when I go through life and I think about some of the hard relationships that I've had, I think about my relationship with my parents, who I love dearly. I no longer have a relationship with them, but I lead with unconditional love and grace in everything that I do. And so whenever I'm feeling down, it's just a reminder for me that that's my intention. Thank you. That's a great question. Do I rap? Why you ask that? It was good. I appreciate that. Look, I've written many songs, mostly for therapy. It's been, my journaling into rap songs. But maybe if you can help me produce it, we can do that. Bet. Yes, sir. What position did I play? I played butt back. When you run on the field and coach like, get your butt back. No, I played corner. In high school, I played running back, receiver, everything. But in college, I played cornerback. Yeah.
So, when you talk about your past, how do
So when I wrote that poem at the end, it was thinking about just that, right? How do you live in the present? And so I say right now is all we have, right? Because the past happened. The past has already happened. And I guess a Chinese philosopher, Lao Tzu. He says, if you're living in the past, then you're depressed. If you're living in the future, then you're anxious. But if you're at peace, you're living in the present. And so it's just a matter of, because our minds are meant to wander. Our minds are geared to think back, because thinking back is going to protect us. If there was a bear in that bush over there, and I need to remember that there was a bear in that bush. But we're not always running from that bear anymore. Sometimes the bear is that test that I'm afraid of. And it feels in our minds and in our bodies that we are trying to survive. And so it's a matter of, this is something I have with the faculty and staff, is to promote mindfulness. Like moments where you, in the most stressful time of your day, or even at the beginning of your day, can sit down, breathe, collect your thoughts, put your feet down and say, I'm right here. I'm right here in my shoes. You can look down, look around. And as opposed to your mind's going to say, oh, I'm back in that shootout. I hope none of y'all have been in a shootout. Or I'm back, or I'm in the future and I got to think about college and I got to think about all this stuff. Like, no, you're just right here. And all you can control is right now. So mindfulness practice is one of the greatest things that I've ever done for myself to do that. Great question. Right here. Say it again. What guided me to be a motivational speaker? I kind of stumbled upon it, honestly. So I wrote the book and not knowing what would come of it, right? I wanted to share it with the world as opposed to, just keeping it in for myself or for like a family group. But I didn't know that it would have the impact that it did. And I was asked to speak at a large nonprofit as a keynote address. And the response I got from that, from people coming up to me afterwards and just crying and telling me, like, everyone needs to hear this message. This is a powerful thing. That really helped motivate me to do it, because when I was younger, you wouldn't have heard a word come out of my mouth. I think I was selective mute because of the anxiety and the stress that I put myself under and was under. I didn't like talking to people because I didn't trust people. I didn't care to be around people. I didn't want any of that. But I recognize the power that stories have. I recognize the power that my story has and the way that it comes out and coming from me, right? To say as a young black man that I go to therapy, that's going to change things for people, because I'm not crazy. I'm not, weird. And I can go and say that with pride. And I think that's some of the motivating things, just to really help other people live better and healthier lives.
So when you were going through all this personal development, how did you enforce the positive routines in your life? How did you focus on what they were bringing you and how you should keep striving towards them? Is there any process you use for that, or is it just kind of natural?
So how do you reinforce those positive habits of breaking away from some of those negative routines? And I'll say, for me, it was two things. It was, one, have some non-negotiables with myself and with the rest of the world. And non-negotiables are things that I will not budge on, right? And for me, for a long period of time, it was my Monday night yoga practice, right? You could be playing football, you could be going out to a bar, you could be doing anything on that Monday night. I'm not coming because I'm doing this because I realize the impact that it's having on me. So having those non-negotiables, whatever it is, and you have to stay true to those. And maybe you need an accountability partner to do that. And so having somebody who sees your vision, is aligned in your vision, that you can share with. Because maybe it's Tuesday and I call my accountability partner, I'm like, I didn't do it. It's like, this is non-negotiable, right? And so non-negotiables. And then on the other side is strong boundaries, right? And that's tough. That's tough when you're younger and you are dependent on people in your life that may be the cause of that toxicity, that may be cause of some of those unhealthy habits. But as you get older and you gain independence, you understand that you have the control and the agency over your life, and that you can create healthy boundaries. And there's nothing wrong with healthy boundaries. I like to say, again, unconditional love does not mean unconditional tolerance, right? I will love you to death, But if I have to love you from afar, I will. And so non-negotiables and boundaries. Can you say it a little bit louder? How do I keep myself from getting caught up in the things that did happen in the past? I think it's a matter of knowing that I have no control over that, right? If it's in the past, I literally cannot go back and change it. If it's a loss, right, I cannot bring that person back. If it's something that I did, I cannot unhurt somebody. I cannot be unhurt. And so I can't change that. Only thing that I can do is focus on the things that I can change and find peace in those things that I can't. And so with me, it's acknowledge it. One thing is definitely acknowledge it. Because I'll be honest, I've hurt people. I've been hurt by people and I've hurt people. And one of the greatest things I've ever done for myself is to be real about it and acknowledge it and say, this happened. And then from there, going into what did I learn from this? Because every experience you can find something that you learned, whether it be from you hurting somebody or from you being hurt or from something happening, right? You can learn from every experience, and it's pulling out that lesson, right? Take your losses and turn them into lessons. It's about pulling the lesson out of it and using that to be better, to live happier, healthier in the future, right? Because you have no control about the future, no control over you just reminded me of something. I was in the airport, and I saw this sign. It was really cool. It said, this present moment used to be the unimaginable future. And then the light blinked and it changed. It said, this moment used to be the future. It was a really cool sign in Houston airport. But just knowing that you have no control over that and that all you have control over is right now. Not even the future. All you have control over is right now. And the culmination of your right nows becomes your future, becomes your life. So control right now. You than you.
The people that weren't born with parents to set boundaries for them, the people that were born into parents with substance abuse that weren't there, what would you have to say for them since they would have any sort of guidance or any person to set boundaries?
Yes, that's a great question. For people who didn't have parents or people to set boundaries for them, one thing that I point out in a lot of times when I talk is just the power of the support system that surrounded me, that wasn't in my nuclear family, right? So I had grandparents, I had teachers, I had coaches, I had different things. And so it is going to be extremely important. One, is very hard when you're in a situation like that because it's harder to trust people. It's harder to get connected with people. But there is someone safe in your life, right? The people that I've met today here, from a faculty and staff standpoint, have been phenomenal. You have some safe people in your life. Finding those safe people that can help foster that healthy relationship, that healthy connection with an adult. Because the one single most common factor in helping a child build resilience is just one loving, caring, supportive adult, right? Over all these different studies, looking at all these different people who have gone through trauma and everything else, is the love and care of one adult. It doesn't say parent, it says adult. And so finding someone, and maybe it's just a matter of coming up to them and talking to them for a little bit and just getting a sense. They know to be authentic. They know to be real. They know to be vulnerable in their own stories in a way that is appropriate. And building that relationship with somebody that you can get to that point to where you can ask the question, hey, I'm dealing with this, dealing with that. Do you have any advice? And recognize that no one is perfect. Right? Nobody is perfect. I've said that earlier. But even your parents, even teachers, even adults who've lived a really long life, they have imperfections. And that's where the grace comes in. Understanding that they have a story, that they have flaws. And you give them grace for that because you know that we're all on a journey trying to understand and learn every single day. But try to find a supportive adult around you. Yeah. Does that help? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. How did I maintain that identity when I was the only one in that environment. For me, one thing I pride myself on is the authenticity in how I show up. Like no matter where I'm at, the values and the core of who I am is going to be the same. I may talk more over here than I do over there. I may use a slang term that you understand that in a different terminology than you don't, but that's just a matter of communication, right? So throughout it all, I felt like I've always been true to who I am and being like the coffee bean, right? If I can't show up and have a positive impact on this world, then I don't belong there. Right? I say go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. Right? Go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. And so if you can't show up as you and be celebrated and be celebrated for being you, then it's probably not a place for you. And again, I understand that as a young person, you have to be certain places. Like you have to be certain places. But once you get the agency and the ability to do things independently, you can make and choose the places that you're going to be. And so it was a matter of just knowing, like, because honestly, I would show up to school and there was this perception of who I was from the people at school. But then I would go back to the hood, and then there was a perception of who I was because I came from this place, right? Oh, you traded, you left, you did this, you did that. And it's like in the midst of it all, I was having to just look internally. Who am I? How am I? And it was all about knowing who I was. Knowing yourself and loving yourself are the two strongest forces in the world. So know who you are, show up as you are, and if it's not accepted, then that's probably not a place you need to be. Does that help? Yeah. Yes. If you got a drive, goals, things that you want to do, how do you turn those thoughts into action? I love that question. It's a great question. And I often say, it's like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. How do you run a marathon? One step at a time. Right? And so when you have these goals and thoughts and these big ambitions, it's going to seem so daunting that task is going, like, that you can't even accomplish that. And so oftentimes what we do is we get discouraged and we say, nope. Right? And oftentimes, other times we say that we don't deserve those big things. Like, that's cool and it'd be great to go to Mars or whatever, but I'm not the person to do that. And so when you have to have the belief first, the belief that you are deserving of that. Everybody say, I am deserving of greatness. You have to have the belief that you are deserving of that greatness. And then, just like eating the elephant, one bite at a time. So process. This is why I trust the process. Is such a critical phrase and a critical thing to do in life, but you sometimes have to create a process. So so map out what it is that goal is, and then what is the thing right before that you have to do. Let's say it's graduate from college, right? What do you have to do before graduating from college? You have to graduate from high school, and you just walk it back, right? Until you get to a step that is accomplishable. And so that step, like, let's say you want to write a book. Well, in order to write a book, you have to write a page. So maybe I just write a page. And maybe a page is too daunting. Write a sentence. So take the big goal and take it and bring it all the way back to a small, accomplishable thing and have that process throughout and trust it. Because if you were to ask me if I were ever going to write a book before I turned 30 years old, like, I would not have told you yes, but it was a matter of breaking it down into accomplishable tasks. Did I like Vanderbilt? Loved it. It's a great school if you're thinking about it. If you come, you'll be in Nashville. You can say what's up to me. But yeah, it was a great school. Top 15 school in the country. I went from 2-10 in football, 2-10 in football to bowl games and things. And so, like, I got a really good, well-rounded experience. I met some of my best friends to this day. Yeah, it was a great experience. I loved it. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you. All right, awesome, you guys. I hope you enjoyed hanging out with Reggie this morning. He's going to be around for a few minutes. We're not going to dismiss just yet because we have a few minutes. We have a wacky school day, of course, because we had a late start. So we cannot move our lunchroom times. So you cannot go into the lunchroom until 11:58, which is fine. We'll hang out in here for a few minutes. But I just want to kind of reiterate what he said, a few things that he said. I want you to look around now at every adult in the room to stand up. So all of our faculty members. And I want you to know that no matter what's going on in your life, we have lots of rules and we do have high expectations for you guys, but we're all here to help you at any point in your life, okay? So we'll hang out in here just for a few minutes. If you need to go back to the upper school to grab your lunch, you're absolutely welcome to do that, but we cannot go into the dining hall until 11:58, all right? So once again, yeah, let's take a picture. Oh, a picture. You guys, have a seat. Want to get a selfie? Reggie has lots of social media, so you'll be on social media.